Thank you for being here, and thank you for your. We are, many of us in this room today are doing something we've never done before. So for all of us, we are working together as a team, and we are figuring things out as we go. And guess what? You are now all part of that process. So welcome, and we're all going to go and do this new thing together. My name is Chris Rodolico. I use she, her pronouns. I am female. I wear glasses. I have this funky rainbow headscarf that I borrowed from my daughter. Please don't tell her. No pictures. And I'm the director of Follow Your Art Community Studios, which is our nonprofit community art center in Melrose. And I welcome you all to IRL in real life, taking space. I will give you some brief information, and I'm going to pass it over to our much more capable MC hosts. First, some housekeeping. There are several ways out of the building. The way you came in, which is a ramp out to the side. There's also an exit out this way where there are several steps to go down. That door is open if you need it. There are two non-gendered accessible bathrooms over here if you need them at any time. During our intermission, there are some refreshments, and I think that's all my housekeeping. If I'm missing, feel free to shout it out. I'm going to drop. I don't know why I have all your stuff. Oh, because you can use it. See, like I said, this is going to be a new experience for all of us. And I was holding these things, and then I did return them to her. But that's Organizers for Real Equality, or MORE. This was a grassroots organization that developed in around 2017 and wanted events where we try really to showcase and bring attention to individuals who are from groups that we don't tend to hear from very often. Follow Your Art is, like I said, a nonprofit community art center. We are dedicated to building a creative community that's open to all. We do this through programs at our Big Yellow House that engage children, teens, and adults of all ages in creative processes, and by collaborating in the community with other organizations like the Melrose Commission on Disability, which is our sponsor and our collaborator for this event, to create spaces for individuals to build community together through visual arts, creative writing, music making, collaborative theater sometimes, and like tonight, story sharing. One of the ways we make these events happen is through Arts for All. When you came in, there was some information about Arts for All. That is our program that makes sure that our creative opportunities are available to everyone, regardless of financial constraints or ability. Any donations that are given tonight go directly toward accessibility services through Follow Your Art, through Arts for All. Just a little side note, in the last year we've launched mini storytelling events, storytelling light, baby storytelling with training wheels, in little small events at the Big Yellow House. We will continue those again in the fall. For somebody who listens and is inspired by these storytellers tonight, and you're kind of like, I think I want to share, come find me, we'll get you on the list, we'll make sure that you can come in and be part of our storytelling community. This event is the culmination of dedicated work and effort, and if you forgive me just for one more minute, I'm going to thank some people that are here, and this event really wouldn't be taking place without them. The Melrose Commission on Disability, it has been a joy to work with you as a commission. I'm so grateful that you are part of my community and that you're here to do the work that you're doing. Temple Beth Shalom for being our host in this space, Dorothy and Evans Travis, who have been very busy bees over the last hour and a half helping us get all of this organized. MMTV, Dan, thank you for helping us out so that we can capture all of this on our YouTube channel for people who are not in the room. Our IRL committee, Rilda, Chris, Sarah, Maureen, Garen, Elaine, Erin, Carol, thank you so much for all of the work that you've been doing. Our coaches, Chris Robinson, Rilda Cassell. They are a gift to this community. They are a gift to our storytelling community. Get to know them. They're wonderful people, and we thank them. A large thank you to our storytellers. Folks are coming up here to do a thing that is hard, because they're not just talking in front of people like I'm doing, and I can pretend that I'm comfortable doing this all day, but they're talking about themselves, and they're talking about real things that are in their lives. And thank you to you, because you are now part of this process. Listening to stories, listening to personal stories is an active event. It's not a passive event. So you coming to this event right now are willing to be engaged in this process, so you are now participants in this story sharing event. So thank you for being here. And I would like to thank our MCs. I am so happy that they are going to be here tonight. I have Erin Ryan Heineman, she, her pronouns. She is a disabled speaker and writer and creator, and the Secretary of the Melrose Commission on Disability. In your program, there's information about how to learn more about Erin. And then Becky Curran-Kikula, who also uses she, her pronouns. She's a motivational speaker and an advocate for disability inclusivity in schools and workplaces. Again, BeckyMotivates.com. Please check out her website. Thank you for your patience, and I'm going to pass it along. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, check. We're doing great. Okay, hello. Welcome so much. Welcome to Temple Beth Shalom, and welcome to the Storytelling Night, the IRL Storytelling Night for collaboration with Fowler Art Studios and the Melrose Commission on Disabilities. My name is Erin Ryan Heineman. I was just introduced. I do use she, her pronouns, and I'm a white woman. I have brown hair that's kind of put up and glasses. I wear a bunch of things on my arm due to my disability. Like Chris said, I'm the secretary on the Melrose Commission on Disabilities, which is kind of difficult because I do have an issue with typing, but I get it done. And we are so happy to have you here tonight. Being June, I'd like to extend a special and hearty welcome to those of us in the LGBTQ+ community, especially trans individuals and those who love them. So thank you for being here. It's going to be a great night of live storytelling. I'm here with one of my best friends in the world, Becky Curran-Kikula. And I say that because we've known each other, we've been together, we grew up together. In second grade, we're in the same class, Mrs. Wall, right? Yeah, Mrs. Wall's class at Union Street Elementary School. And Becky was a very close friend growing up. And it was not easy to be Becky's friend. And I don't say that in the way you probably think when I say like, oh, I just like keep her from like the people who are like mean to her. No, I say that in the way that I've had to reckon with myself, right? When I remember being in like 6th grade and being Becky's friend, we would go to the store after school on half day, right? And be walking home with my other friends like, ugh, Becky, hurry up, right? It's okay to laugh, it's 20 now. I was a little jerk, but so are most 6th graders. That's what I mean when I say that. It's kind of hard to be Becky's friend in that way, but I did not understand that it was actually hard to be Becky at that age, to be in 6th grade, and to be a middle schooler who was going through a lot of different things like surgeries and things like that. And today we are very strong friends due to our shared disability and just being part of the disability community. And so I would like to introduce Becky to you all.
I've definitely enjoyed our friendship over the years, and I think something we talk often about is just how I was born with my disability, and Erin acquired her disability, and now it's kind of come full circle because her disability has also caused some physical limitations, and those are what I've had my entire life. It's funny kind of building on the story. I didn't know that that was one of the stories Erin was going to tell today, but I was in college with a close friend who became my roommate and one of my closest friends to this day. And we were going to the grocery store carrying groceries and she was telling me to hurry up, and there was someone in a car passing by, and they were saying, she's trying as hard as she can. But I also have that expectation for my friends to hold me accountable. So my friend at that point in time knew that I could have gone a little faster, and I was being a little lazy. So, but I did forget to describe myself, so I am a white woman with dwarfism, so I have facial features that show that I have dwarfism, have short brown hair, blue dress, black sweater, black leggings, and black shoes. I identify as she, her. So I kind of wanted just to capture why this event is important to me. As a person with dwarfism, I didn't really think people cared about my story, and as I was just going through life with my community, a lot of people who do not have dwarfism or disabilities, I just wanted to fit into the crowd as best I could, even though it was obvious that I stood out. And it wasn't until I got to college where I got involved in an organization called Little People of America, and I started to learn that I wasn't alone with my lived experiences and challenges, and it was kind of nice to be around people like me. And then building off of that in college, I got involved with Toastmasters International, helped start a chapter in college at Providence College, and really tried to figure out how I could start telling my story in a succinct way. And didn't do too much of it for the next several years, but I faced a lot of discrimination when it came to trying to enter the workforce. I said that when I was in residency, went on 100 interviews over the course of 4 months until I finally got a temporary job at a large talent agency out in Los Angeles. And I went to work out in Los Angeles because I needed to figure out how we change what we see in the media when it comes to representation of people with disabilities. It affects how we're treated in society. But it was a long journey, 6 years working at a talent agency and then in television casting, and I thought, these were great experiences, but the industry is moving way too slow. I need to figure out how can I reach as many people as possible just by sharing my story and hoping that it can help others. So I moved from the West Coast back home to Boston, and my sister, a creative writing teacher, said, my students want to meet you. And I thought, I've always been taught to, every day that I don't have a job, treat it like a job, looking for a job. And it was like, how can I make this opportunity and experience productive? So I started just going in and sharing my story. And even though I was only an assistant in Hollywood and didn't make it to the certain level of career that I had hoped for, people wanted to hear my story and continue to learn how to help others and share my story, looking at families who are facing challenges, especially when their kids are going from elementary to middle school, middle to high school. Help be the vulnerable one, let people ask me the hard questions, so that discrimination is less likely to happen to that person who is already struggling to go from one place to the next. So really, it's a driving passion of mine, and I'm excited to be here tonight to hear the wonderful stories that we have to hear.
Okay, so I'm going to move off stage because Becky is going to introduce our first speaker. One thing that I do want to note is that sort of the driving theme of that, I think, between Becky and I, how we'll be introducing stories, things like that, is the fact that Becky was born with her disability, and I acquired my disability later in life because it's very different to live in for people who grew up with a condition are used to the world seeing them differently, and I was not when I was 30. I was 5 years old and like a teacher, and it was very shocking to be all of a sudden moved differently through the world. And so that's going to be like our touchstone for the evening. But I would introduce our speakers.
I think we are going to have the speaker on Zoom. Is that?
Yes, we are in Zoom, and I'm going to be the avatar.
So I've had the great pleasure of meeting Keisha virtually. Our worlds have collided in many ways, just with our passion for disability inclusion and her interaction with the organization I work for, Disability In, as a certified disability-owned business. So that means that it is 51% owned and operated by someone with a disability, and they can have the opportunity to work with major corporations as vendors. So Keisha, I'm excited to hear about your story. And when it comes to to getting beyond disability denial to acceptance.
You're on, Tricia.
See if we can get the volume up. Can we try that again, Keisha?
Okay, hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
See if we can get the volume
awesome.
up. Can we try that again,
Thank you so
Keisha?
much for that introduction.
Okay, hi, can everybody
I'm
hear
gonna go
me?
ahead and start my story.
Yeah.
Okay,
See if we can get the
You'd be
volume up. Can we
surprised
try
what
that
you
again,
take for
thank you so much for
granted.
that introduction. Okay, hi, can everybody
Those things
go
you
ahead
think
and
of,
start
but
my
are actually a part of life.
Okay,
Most people think that when they go for the crash and jump in, my usual spot.
go ahead
The
and
girl
start
from the opposing team took her stance to bat.
Okay,
Squatting and heard her blow was softly. My usual spot. When the pitcher was easy, the batter hit the ball with her stance to bat. This far to a place where I knew I could reach it. I squinted my eyes and rushed towards the ball, making the best and only catch I'd gotten all season. Everybody screamed out. My fellow teammates cheered in excitement as I smiled from ear to ear. It was time for our turn to bat. Afternoons in elementary school were spent this way. On the softball field, swinging my bat, swing whizzing from base to base until I so home. Stealing bases turned into stealing glances at crushes as I ran between floors to classes at my rather large high school at Cambridge and July. Before I knew it, I found my second home at Framingham State University, where I spent my days in fashion and merchandising classes, sewing both hands the rotary. Leopard polka dot blazer combos and lined mini dresses are some of my favorites. Playing the fashion club at Framingham was one of my favorites as well. Planning events, making tons of friends, and along the way, especially in the Black community. My nights were equally eventful as my girls and I got dressed up, dancing to Beyonce in the background, and made our way to parties and events. I love to sew. Modeling my designs from the likes of Kimberly Simmons and Betsy Johnson are my main fashion designers that I looked up to. My admiration for Kimura came from the peak of the baby fat age. Her line was bejeweled and her clothing was embroidered with her signature cat logo, often in gold. I love that she was a boss. She had it all, and I love that. She managed her business clothing line and never tried to hide the fact that she was a mother. For Betsy Johnson, I just love the funkiness that I needed in my life. I love her quirkiness, her polka dots, and her cartwheels that she does at the end of her fashion show. Her style was bold and unexpected. I adored her for layer prints and the creativity she bodied. I figured, I can do that. I'd be living my life on my terms, and I was loving it. I was Keisha Graves, agile, loving, creative daughter, sister, and friend. After college graduation, I found myself back in my hometown of Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I earned my MBA degree at Cambridge College. While in school, I put my bachelor's degree in fashion merchandising to work. I was an independent merchandiser for a company, traveling from store to store to ensure that brands were represented accurately in their prospective places and departments. Having this job was a dream come true. It was something I loved to do, and the flexibility allowed me time to still make it to my classes and study for my second degree. One day, I was walking in the supermarket with my mom and sister. We'd be chatting and shopping, basking in the quality time of necessary tasks, when out of nowhere, I tumbled and fell to the floor. It took everyone by surprise, including myself. As I sat on the cold grocery ground, my legs had seemed to have left the rest of me. It felt like they betrayed me, and it seemed like the rest of my body was upset about it. It became like a dead weight. I couldn't lift myself up, nor raise my arms. But I thought, that's pretty strange. And my mom and sister even tried to pick me up that evening, but they couldn't. So good thing a strange young man came over and he was able to get me on my 2 feet. My mind told my limbs to do something that they just wouldn't do. I needed I believe it was 2 guys that helped me up to bring me to my feet. I chalked it up needing to lose weight. I'm thinking, no big deal. I just need to lose weight. That's why I fell. No big deal. I was sure that was the issue until it happened again and again and again. My legs felt weak and I was always on edge that I would be on the ground without warning or my consent. Then my arms followed suit. I remember lifting my arms to reach for a snack in the kitchen cabinet one night, and my arms would not extend out as it should. That feeling and frustration from the grocery store returned as I struggled to make my hand meet the box. It happened again during my regular exercise routine. I popped in my walk away the pounds tape, following Leslie Sassoon step by step, slide and slide, and I couldn't do it. I was getting frustrated again. I couldn't understand. I felt like I was fighting against a ton weights, pushing it back down. Something wasn't right. My mom and I agreed that I should go see a doctor. We made an appointment out here in Tufts Medical Hospital to see an orthopedic. I always remember that day in the examination room. I go in, both of them asked me to sit and raise my right leg. The leg would not extend out as it normally should. Both times, it was like bizarre to me. And I just felt like something was wrong. But I still told myself, oh, I just need to lose weight. No big deal. But the looks of concern on their faces as they helped to lift me for causing concern and worry had me worry as well. After seeing the orthopedist, I saw a neurologist. Then the real work began. A lot of it. A lot of testings I never heard of, like EKG, EMG, them sticking a needle in my legs to moving them about the muscles to see how they react. But the most interesting of all was the muscle biopsy, where they took a piece of muscle from out of my right leg. And that's when they determined I had muscular dystrophy. The entire process was draining and uncomfortable. But the biggest test confirmed my diagnosis. On my back in the cold operating room, they injected my leg with anesthesia. I made sure not to move as they sliced open my right leg and extracted a chunk of my muscle. I know it's weird at the time though, but it kind of was satisfying. It was weird to be awake during this time. If it hadn't hurt so much, I probably would have tried to reach out and touch the muscle sample as they prepared it for diagnosis. They closed everything up, gave me a pair of crutches, and sent me on my way. I thought I'd be going to class that evening, like usual, but the pain and grogginess of the surgery proved otherwise. I was bummed to have to share the process with my teacher. Before I did, none of this seemed real, but it was certainly becoming too real. About a week later, I got my phone call that would change my life forever. Dr. Catherine Wang voice was firm as she called. She declared I had muscular dystrophy, limb-girdle muscular dystrophy to be exact. The phone call lasted about a couple of minutes. She shared more about it when we met next in person. But as soon as I hung up with her, I rushed to Google because I'm like, what is muscular dystrophy? I don't have that. I had to know what this was, what it meant. What was earth would I do? I learned that this particular type impacts the body from the shoulders down to the legs. I learned that most of folks with MD are males and are usually diagnosed as a baby or during adolescence. I learned that it's progressive and that there is no cure. So of course I had mixed feelings and confusion. How do I have muscular dystrophy? I was in mix of beliefs and confusion. How am I going to live? I questioned. Will I have to be in a wheelchair? I wondered. I shook my head. What if she's wrong? This can't be my life. It has to be something else. I finally decided. I began to shut everyone out, sinking into my reality and onslaught feelings that came with it. I was very private, keeping most things to myself and only displaying a bubbly personality with lots of laughter. I didn't feel like much of laughing now, so I buried myself away from most of it. My immediate family were my support. I read that a healthy diet and exercise could help me keep my situation at bay, so my cousin and I joined Weight Watchers. I spent time at that time with my mom and sister. My mom accompanied me to doctor's appointments, and I made it to class. Sometimes on my own, others with a cane. I continued to work as a merchandiser as long as I was able to. Being on Weight Watchers, I was glad that I lost 36 pounds, and I felt like I would be somehow be able to conquer this thing. I said, muscular dystrophy who? I only realize now that I was still in denial about it for a few years after I received that phone call. I thought I could diet and exercise it all away, ignoring the reality that it was a progressive and encompassing disease, though I walked with a cane on many days whenever I had an important meeting or interview. I'd rather tell them, oh, I was in a car accident, or I sprained my ankle. Because saying I had muscular dystrophy just didn't seem real, and I wasn't ready to accept that. One day, I confided in a close friend and telling him what was going on. He encouraged me to let the cat out the bag and share my story. And I said, no way. Why would I do that? I don't have muscular dystrophy. So I thought about it some more. Hesitantly, I opened up my laptop and started spilling out all my thoughts into my page. It wasn't until I was stroking the keys nonstop that the truth finally set into my heart. As I'm there typing it, saying it out loud, I'm like, wow, I have muscular dystrophy. I thought then, I said it to myself again. I have muscular dystrophy. That was crazy. It was like, never mind what the doctors were saying. As I started typing it, saying it out loud, I'm like, I have muscular dystrophy. I read what I wrote back to myself with the new acceptance of truth. I thought maybe it was time to share it with the world. I told my employer just last year that I had MD and waiting on a response. It took a weight off my shoulder, to be honest, with my boss. I felt so relieved. My condition has progressed since then. I am regularly tired, need the use of a cane, still have issues walking and not getting, and occasionally need a wheelchair. You don't know how it feels until it happens to you. I often feel like it controls my life. I posted my blog on Tumblr page and shared the post on Facebook where all my friends and family and acquaintances would learn the secret that I've been holding on for years. They read my post and supported me with tons of positive feedback, with thank yous for finally sharing my experience. It felt warm. My family, my blood relatives, and my Facebook family continue to be a light and check on me as the symptoms progressed. It was really nice. But after a while, I started to feel like they really didn't get it. They didn't know what it was like to fall constantly or not to be certain if you could even move day by day. They didn't realize that I had to call ahead to go to a night out with friends, to the club or anything to ensure that they had a functioning elevator just to make sure I can get in. I started reaching out to other disability communities on social media and began cultivating a new sense of friends. Because at the end of the day, like I said, I get support from family and friends, but there's nothing like talking and connecting with others in the disability community. Others who got it. It felt like I was finally understood, and even better, that I was not alone. Now, 5 years later, I only know that I have limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. The doctors can't put their fingers on what subtype I have, but they know at some point that this thing could affect my heart. Echocardiogram tests are pretty regular for me once a year to let them know that my heart is still working in order. It's certainly scary, but it has become my new normal. Living with muscular dystrophy is still new to me. Every day I wake up not knowing how my legs are going to feel or if I'm going to feel them at all. I don't know what pain I'll have as I try to leave my apartment. I'm in my wheelchair, hoping not to fall out of it, afraid that I won't be able to pick myself back up. It's made me realize my internal strength despite the weakening of my limbs. I didn't think that I would have so much strength to continue on after my diagnosis in my early 20s, but I somehow figured it out and flipped it into a motivating organization. I had the power of resilience and positivity, but I didn't have it before. I developed a sense of empathy, really understanding that people everywhere struggle with things that our outside world cannot see. And I was one of them. I look back and I feel I took things for granted, stealing bases on the softball field, running up and down the stairs with friends in high school, sewing a one-of-kind in my designs to strut around and dress my models. But there's no way I could have known. My new normal doesn't include any of that. Instead, it includes a lot of time with personal care assistants who helps me get in and out of bed, the shower around, and helping me around town. It includes plenty of trips to the doctor and physical therapy. And sometimes lots of stares from people wondering what a young millennial is doing in her wheelchair. That's all okay. My new life is my life. I've accepted my normal. I've regained my bubbly personality and have become a source of positivity and support for others in the disabled and deceased community through my organization and clothing line. And that's right, Girls Chronically Rock. My smile has returned, that I am fulfilling my dreams. My path looks a little different than I envisioned, but I am happy. I still hang out with friends in bars and restaurants and to enjoy my foods and reality TV. I tell people all the time, my reality shows is what keeps me sane. I have no problem being outside of my songs and listening to Beyonce. I'm a business owner who loves the work that they do. I'm happy. I'm loved. I'm whole. And I won't take where I've come for granted. Not one bit. There's no cure or pill that would fix this. My muscular dystrophy isn't going anywhere. It has its way of controlling some of my life, but it isn't who I am. I am still Keisha Graves' loving, creative daughter, sister, and friend. I've gained a few more titles: graduate, survivor, entrepreneur, speaker, and advocate. They didn't take my life. It gave me purpose behind all that I do. Pressing on after my diagnosis is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm much stronger for doing it. My will and support of my family keeps me going. I wanted to remind, never underestimate the power of your desire. If you want to have anything badly enough, you can. Every day I ask myself, how do I decide I want to live? My PCAs help me from my bed, gets me ready for the day, then I try my best to conquer it with a smile. That's how I choose to live each and every day. Thank you, everyone. That's my story.
Okay, I think we need another quick round of applause for Keisha. Keisha, if you're still there, I would like to say that I felt so much for your story. Your story is so close to my story. I have multiple sclerosis and very, very similar experiences, and I love the way that at the end of your story you're talking about how whole you are, how happy you are, and I agree, it took a long time for me to become the person I am today, and it's a little bit different, but it's I'm still happy, and after all this disability that has happened, so thank you so much for sharing. Our next speaker, Katie Kennedy, was born with lived her early life in Melrose, but was very, very well traveled, and she has traveled to I think 60 countries.
I said about 20 on 4 continents.
Oh yeah, 20. I must have okay, 20 countries on 4 continents.
Very well traveled, and being well traveled, she's an interesting person, and she thinks that being an interesting person begins with being interested in others. She is here to tell that story. So thank you so much, Katie.
Can you hear me? Probably next to me. The title of my story's first sentence is, I used to be interested. It's a statement that I said to my cornea specialist in February 2020, right before the pandemic changed our world. He had diagnosed me with my 4th cornea dystrophy, and it was going to involve him changing his treatment plans and my ability to juggle the other eye issues. His response to me is, "You're still interesting." And he said, "I'll be right back." He left the room, and where I see him at Tufts Medical Center, it's this funniest, the Beanwood building, sandwiched between the Wilbur Theater and the Wang Theater. And it's up on the 11th floor, and they have all these funny shaped rooms and cut up spaces. And it's probably good the meeting was in February 2020, not later in 2020, because there certainly isn't any room to have 6 feet of distance. When I saw him approaching the door to come back into the room, he had a group of his international fellows with him. And the way they proceeded in the group, it was like an Olympic team marching into the stadium. And so every year he has probably close to 100 applications for 12 spots for cornea doctors from all over the world. And so in the new diagnosis that he added to my repertoire, I thought he had invited his international fellows in to explain, okay, now she has this, how are we going to integrate it into her treatment and her care? But that's not what happened. Each and every one of them spoke and said how I was interesting because of the interest I had shown in them and to them. Erin introduced me saying that I have done a lot of traveling, and I can't really, because of my eye issues, go into the world much anymore. And Dr. Hammer brought the world to me. And so many of these fellows, women, that's what they call them, fellows. It's a group. Came from a number of countries that I have been in, and I think I'm on my 5th team of international fellows, and they'll change again this summer. And I love to talk, I love to ask questions. I've never met a stranger. And so when I'm interacting with these people who are learning from me, about me, and explain and answer all my questions along with Dr. Hammer, it was really interesting to hear how I had touched their hearts. My background with disabilities, my undergraduate degree is special ed. I taught special ed. I did special education advocacy for a number of years. It started with my Uncle Bobby, who was a man with Down syndrome, who was one of my greatest teachers and still remains one of my greatest teachers in my heart. And I was a member of the very first Peace Corps special education project ever, and I went to Kenya. So my disability background, my special education, integrated my heart into looking at difference internationally, cross-culturally, which led me to do a number of other degrees in intercultural communication, international management, international relations, and I have had the privilege of traveling as members of teams and doing individual work as well in those areas. So I always want to get on a plane, I always want to travel, I'm interested in difference. And 17 years ago, when I came back to Melrose after many years, as my mother's health was declining and I wanted to help take care of her, let her remain in our home, I started to have funny sensations and problems with my eyes. A couple of years after she passed, I was diagnosed with my first cornea issue. And I'm still trying to understand them all. I have very serious, this is what they keep telling me, very complicated and very rare, really rare cornea issues. My daily routine is, when I wake up in the morning, I don't know what it's going to be like, because I don't have the control of knowing what the pain's going to be. One of my conditions is called corneal neuralgia, corneal neuropathy. And about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the doctors said to me, well, of course, you know the cornea is the most painful cell in the human body. And I didn't know that. And so now, everybody that comes in, I'll say, is the cornea cells, are they the most painful thing in the human body? And so I get more information, and some of them, people have given me copies of studies and explaining it. It's difficult. Sometimes takes me 2 or 3 hours to get my eyes going in the morning. Sometimes I don't sleep well at night because I wake up like the knives are stabbing in my eyes. And so going out into the world so much, my world is really, eye doctors, eye appointments, trying to see. And with the pandemic, it was interesting because in some ways my isolation in my daily routine wasn't really much different than before. And so now, as things continue to get a little more complicated, some of my issues are autoimmune based. And so they don't know how or when they're going to change, so I can go along and do what I'm supposed to do. I have serum blood teardrops. I'm taking the blood out. They take 6 tubes a month. With stem cells that I use in my eyes 6 to 8 times a day. I have steroid drops I have to put in at night. Gels that I have to open my eyes with, because sometimes I literally have to pry my eyes open because they won't open unless I do that. I take the antibiotics Sunday nights to help control the inflammation. Warm compresses, and my joy and my treat is having weekly acupuncture, which truly helps. I recommend it. Try it for anything. I've never been a person, thank God, who has ever been prone to depression. And I know many people who struggle with depression, who cope with depression. And, but I can't say I understand it because I had never experienced it. My anxiety has gotten worse because of, as I said, not knowing what's going to happen with my eyes and my eyesight and the limitations that will change. The doctors will say, get some exercise, go out for a walk, and it's not safe to walk around sometimes in parts of Melrose, in near where I live. You can't safely cross the street. Traffic signals are not ADA accessible. That's another story that's taking up a lot of my time. As I said in my beginning, I did a lot of work as a disability advocate before I kind of went into my international work, and now I'm coming full circle on that. But over the winter and the holidays, I felt for the very first time in my life that I was starting to get depressed. And 2 things happened that helped turn it around. I have a friend named Margaret, who is an author and a former political journalist. And somebody I don't know well, but we're becoming good friends. And I was asking her about the most recent book she had written, interviewing the former governor of Virginia, who had the blackface incident, and she investigated it and wrote a book about it. And so we got into an interesting conversation about politicians as people, as well as how they're portrayed in the media. And she shared a little bit about a few things that, didn't make the book. And I talked with her and shared with her some of the work I had done internationally, most particularly in Northern Ireland, and with the Good Friday Agreement process in having interviewed many, many people, and the conversations, if you're interested in them, and you ask the right questions, the conversations, they tell you their story. And so I left her condo that morning, and I started to walk home. It's a very short distance to where I live. And I started to walk home, and because she said to me, I should be interviewing you. And I started to walk home and thinking, yeah, I guess I am still interested. And then the final thing I will share before I read a poem that I wrote is the father of one of the employees at the recently closed Biddy and Bo's coffee shop. He was sharing the story of his son and when they adopted him and their family story. And he talked about how his family, he and his wife, they came to a level of acceptance and then knew how to live joyfully, encouragingly in their family. And he said it is the key to acceptance. And again, as I walked home from that exchange, I was like, my eye issues aren't going away. They probably will get worse. I have the best care in the world. I'm grateful. And it was like the veil was lifted. I felt freer, lighter, and he gave me a gift of acceptance. Now, I had a wonderful day on, was it Thursday or Friday? I can't know. What day is today? Thursday. I met Chris and Rilda at Jitters for my story coaching, and I promised that I would go home and kind of work on my story and integrate it, and etc. And then that very evening, I went to Follow Your Art Community Studios, who has, I think she said she was coming, was Teresa?
Teresa's here.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi.
She did a revision workshop. So the poem I wrote in the afternoon is what I worked on that evening in Teresa's revision workshop. And I'd like to read that now. Discovering acceptance. How can we be an open village for all people? Can we leave our doubt at the door and open our hearts to listen and attend to the singing from the soul sounds of others? Pay attention. Pay attention to the meanings and descriptions expressed when someone is telling you about moments on their pilgrimage. The journey of discovering acceptance involves being fully present. How can we learn how to be well together? How can we keep each other safe? How can we learn how to best live together? Can we cooperate and collaborate without fracturing and scapegoating? We need headspace, open space, quiet space, and interior space to reckon with and listen to the voices intrinsic in our own and other stories. Protect hearts. We need space for reflection, rest, resiliency. Only then can we discover acceptance for ourselves and others. What lifts our spirits and gives us balance? What offers us hope which we can then radiate to others? How do we protect and safeguard our rhythm, retreat, restoration, and renewal? Tell the truth. Tell the truth about the present and turn to each other. Ask questions, listen, and ask for help. Listen. There is power and transformation in people telling their stories and shared hospitality of the heart.
Katie, that was amazing, and you are a very interesting person. Thank you for teaching us acceptance and self-acceptance. I'm gonna go ahead and start introducing our next speaker. Something that I didn't share in the beginning is that I am a parent who's experiencing grief. I lost my infant son due to an accident at the hospital. Some of you may have read about it in the newspaper, but playing that parent role gave me a new perspective of even the role of caregivers. As a person with a physical disability, just my whole life, I was like, why do we need to hear the voice of caregivers? Like, they don't have the experience. But then once I had part of that role as my identity, I learned that we need those voices more than ever. Because the more people we can have to advocate for this work of including them, and anyone can fall into that role at any point in time. So I do want to take a chance to introduce Noreen, who is a clinical psychologist by trade, and also a parent of her son, James, who is here tonight, and he has autism. Noreen, I look forward to
At its heart, this is really a story about changing one's way of thinking, of framing the questions to get all the possible answers, even the ones we weren't expecting, especially the ones we weren't expecting. Growing up, my son James was like a lot of little kids in a way. In elementary school, he filled out the same All About Me worksheet that teachers assigned to students early on in the school year so that they could get to know their students. Well, when asked about what he wanted to be when he grew up, James pretty much always answered, astronaut. While being an astronaut is something that might not be in the cards, the thought of traveling through space still comes into play in our story. Given James's differences in how he processes the world, it's always taking him more time to communicate and engage in social interactions. Fine motor weaknesses meant he couldn't really express himself in writing, and physical coordination challenges meant that he couldn't easily keep up with his peers on the playground. That said, it's probably no surprise that when your child is James, or someone like him, lots of meetings and discussions are framed by identifying all the things that cannot be done. In fact, a middle school teacher who only saw James's deficits came to a meeting determined to avoid having him as a student in her class. She practically skipped out of the conference room when it was decided that he was not suitable to be in her class, even with one-on-one support. Ultimately, you realize that basing the discussion around limitations and defining someone by them is like building a fence around a perimeter. We set that fence up right away and never learn what the real boundary is or how far in the distance the horizon lies. Luckily for James, some teachers and therapists wanted to look past the fence by thinking, let's just see what's possible. Let's see what he can do. Even from the young age of 2, James has had a knack for navigating the computer and the internet. He also began watching videos over and over and over again. Even today, his conversations with us usually involve planning his Disney movie watch schedule and reciting his favorite scenes. For those of you who are familiar with the movie Beauty and the Beast, the bar scene with Gaston and LeFou singing about how fabulous Gaston is has been sung loudly and laughingly together over and over and over again. Anyway, in his senior year at Melrose High, James was given the chance to create his own short film about his dream job. He was enrolled in the intermediate video production class.
The major assignment was for students to create a video as a group. But because James was likely not able to participate fully in that type of group work, his teacher, Mr. D, gave James full license to come up with a story, including the plot and the characters, on his own. With the help from Mr. D, he learned how to create video scenes, add animation, include sound effects, and edit his work. His teacher was really impressed that once James learned how to do a skill, he could do it on his own, over and over and over again. Now Mr. D calls James One Take James because he can present his ideas on video in only one take. Anyhow, Mr. D decided to host a premiere of his film and invited everyone in the school to attend. The Learning Commons at Melrose High has a small theater which holds approximately 200 people. There was a big crowd on the day of the premiere. Our next door neighbor told us afterwards that his class was not able to attend, but he had asked his teacher for permission to use the bathroom so he could sneak in to see it. He didn't really know James all that well and was curious. James had prepared some words for the premiere ahead of time and thanked Mr. D for his help. While I personally was unable to attend, James's father was substituting at the high school at the time. Brian texted me and told me that the theater was basically full with teachers, administrators, and students. It was a huge thrill for him to see James address the crowd and to hear the students' reactions to his speech and to the movie as it was happening. The applause at the end felt so genuine. It was certainly a great moment for him. When my husband shared the video of the premiere with me, all I could do was cry. I was filled with so much pride at how so many people were able to witness what James could do. When I was his age, I would never have had the guts to stand up in front of so many people and introduce a school project. It was at that moment that I changed. I remembered a workshop that I attended that introduced the concept of neurodiversity. Within this framework, neurodivergent folks have different brain styles, and that everyone has strengths to offer and challenges to overcome. That means that James does not have to be defined by a disorder. I changed that because I needed to do more to promote neurodiversity in the work that I do as a clinical psychologist. I work hard now to help others advocate for themselves and foster their strengths, and I also educate colleagues on approaches to neurodiverse affirming therapy. A final reminder of how much it's important to highlight what one can do versus what one can't was when James and his teacher shared the story of James's space adventure on the Julie Nolan Show on MMTV in early 2020. In this very public venue, his strengths were highlighted for the whole community to see. And at this time, another little piece of that fence got taken down. Thank you.
In the disability culture space, we take care of each other and we take every individual opportunity to take care of each other and ourselves. So if anyone needs a bio break, a little water, we have individuals around here. We'll run to you. If you raise your hand, we'll bring you a little bottle of water or a cookie. So if you want a cookie, it's a cookie. You know, all right. But I'm going to turn it right back over to him.
Thank you so much, Noreen. I've worked with Noreen. Noreen is the liaison to the Commission on Disabilities and I'm liaison to the CPAC. So it's so wonderful to hear your story, James, and told through your mom. It's great. And that's so exciting about your presentation. Congratulations. Yeah, round of applause. So I was going to introduce the intermission after here. So I'm about to introduce Karen Boyd from the Commission on Disabilities.
Yeah, we're going to keep on going, but people will take care of it. We'll just keep on going without the intermission.
Okay, so we will not be having an intermission, although I think Chris had said that at the top, so that's why Other Chris has
can choose when and to whom to disclose their disability. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at 17 years old, so I was a kid. For a long time, just like Keisha, I wasn't denying it, but I just didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want my acquaintances to know about it, really. But I told some close friends. That was it. And I didn't even tell my boss at my last job before being disabled that I was disabled, that I had multiple sclerosis, until I told them in the hospital. I called them from the hospital when I had my major flare in 2020. That's when I disclosed my disability. So it's a really, it's a big topic in the disability community because you're afraid to tell your boss because you're not going to get treated differently. You want to feel like the rest of, like the not currently disabled. You want to feel like everyone else. And so I'm Karen Boyd. It is my pleasure to introduce Nick Schneider.
I'm Garen Boyd, and I proudly serve as the Vice Chair on the Commission on Disability. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a big guy, probably about 6'1". My kids would describe the hair color as cellophane because they can see. I have blue eyes and a beard, and I would call myself blonde but gray. When you have a rare disability, you don't have many opportunities to run into people who have the same shared life experience with a disability. I have Stargardt's disease. It's a rare retinal condition that affects most people when they're younger. I got it around the time I was 7. Stargardt's occurs in about 1 of every 10,000 people. About 30,000 people in the country have it. There's about 30,000 people in Melrose, so if you can imagine everyone in Melrose having my disease in the entire country, that's what it's like. It's probably because of this that it was before I was in my mid-40s before I actually met someone with the same disease, and I'm going to put an asterisk on that. I'm going to come back to that. First person that had the disease. It is also because I didn't attend any major outings or exposed or go to any major conferences for people who had the disease. I can tell you that why, for most of my life, I resisted telling people. And the reason behind it is I have an invisible disability. Looking at me, you really can't tell that I'm disabled, and I also have the privilege of disclosure. The privilege of disclosure is far and away the best weapon I have in my toolkit for disability. Basically, I can present normal in any situation I walk into, and nobody sees that I have a disability or I'm having any problems. But because of this, I have the option to choose who I decide to tell that I have a disability, when I decide to tell it. And I'm okay with that. What I wasn't okay with was when I was a kid, I got given a whole bunch of large print books, lots of volumes to carry around. I was given lamps with big magnifiers and lights on them. I was given telescopes. I was given binoculars. All these things made me not feel normal And I oftentimes had to answer a lot of questions that I didn't have really good answers for. Have you had your eyes checked lately? Do you need glasses? And one of my favorites is, I have an optometrist that you really should try. They're really amazing. I don't wear glasses. Glasses don't help me. I've had Stargardt since I was 7 years old, and it doesn't help. Oh. Well, could you have surgery? No, there is no cure. Well, what about stem cells? Yeah, say, I was told they're about 5 years out. I never felt any less than these people had amazing intent in telling me this. They couldn't have known that when the conversation started, I was already at a disadvantage. I knew I was outed at that point. They had seen me struggling. I had done something that showed that I couldn't see, and I was angry and upset with myself because at that point in time, I had taken away I did not have my privilege of disclosure. And so it bothered me. I was working at a large insurance company in Boston when I met the person who had the same disease as I did. We had been doing a large rollout for our executives and bringing them new BlackBerries, and I got a ticket and went up and fulfilled it. I walked into his office, and it was a big office. It was an executive, and there were a couple chairs in front of his desk. I'll be with you right in a moment. And I looked over at him sitting at his desk. He was looking at his BlackBerry like this. I walked over to him. I have macular degeneration, for juvenile macular degeneration. I still couldn't use the word Stargardt's disease because of the privilege of disability. I mean, the privilege of disclosure. I have Stargardt's disease, he said, when I sat down. What ensued was an amazing conversation that I can't really remember most of. We talked about transportation, about driving. His wife gave him a ride to work every day, and he was living down on the South Shore, and I was living in the public transportation mecca of Melrose. We connected, and it was really nice. I realized at that point that if either one of us had chosen not to disclose to one another, we would have, I know personally, I never would have met someone else who had my disease. And so now, I think, when I joined the Commission on Disability in 2020, I knew I was coming in with a knowledge deficit. I had never served on a city commission before. I had no idea about ADA policy or standards, and I just wanted to learn. What I did want to also do was serve and advocate for and support a group of people that I identified with. I'm heading into my second term as a commissioner on disability, and I will tell you, I am still learning, and I still have a very fierce desire to support, advocate, and serve the people who I identify with in this community. As I have grown older, I've come to terms with privilege of disclosure. Like any good privilege, you should use it or it becomes less valuable, it becomes worthless. So I've used my privilege of disclosure to tell people about my disease. I mean, geez, I might be one of 3 people in Melrose who have this disease. Getting to know me, you might find somebody who has the same condition and know someone else in the city who has it. I've embraced it because a lot of it is who I am, and I know that it's an important part of who I am as much as the fact that I'm a dad, a commissioner, an artist, or an IT guy. I want to go back to that asterisk just for 1 second. And I told Chris and Rhoda when I was coaching for this story, I said there's an inherent flaw in this story. It's not quite a lie. There's an inherent flaw in the story where I say that this gentleman that I met in John Hancock was the first person I'd ever met with this disability. It's the first person I'd ever met outside of a family member. Up until exactly my 19th birthday, my grandmother passed away on March 26, 1992. I had with me my grandmother, who also had Stargardt's disease, and it's a hereditary condition, and we both had the same condition. And I learned from her such grace, such an ability to shape the world around her disability rather than letting the world shape what her disability was. Much like my partner, Gloria, she was an amazing chef, and she used to use only an electric oven because she had a tendency to always she couldn't tell whether the burner was on, so she put her fingers on it. And she couldn't see, and so we never got her a gas stove. When I did tell the story, and telling the story that it was the first person I met, I do have to go back and say that my grandmother was the first person I met, and also my greatest teacher with disabilities. Thank you very much.
To not discuss her photography, but to discuss disability and learning things along the way. So I'll leave the floor, Marissa.
Hello, everyone. Autism is defined as a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by difficulties with social interaction and restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. For most of my life, I never thought of myself as a person with autism. Sure, I always had trouble fitting in and making friends. At recess, I preferred to play by myself. At home, I arranged my toys in elaborate displays, and I hated when my mom made me invite other kids over for play dates, because invariably, they would try to play with my toys and would mess them all up. I hated the feeling of wind blowing in my face, raindrops touching me, and sunlight shining in my eyes. I hated when my dad vacuumed the floors because the sound of the vacuum cleaner hurt my ears. There were always things that other kids seemed to just know how to do, which I couldn't get the hang of, no matter how hard I tried. For example, riding a bike, or hitting a baseball with a bat, or shooting a basketball through a hoop. One time in gym class, we had to take our shoes off because we were learning gymnastics. And when the time came to put our shoes back on again, I was surprised to find that all the other kids knew how to tie their shoes and I was the only one who didn't. As I got older, I never liked the same movies, music, or TV shows as my peers. I wasn't really able to keep a conversation going the way that other kids did so effortlessly. But I was well behaved, and I was good at reading and writing and math and memorizing names and dates and state capitals. So no one suspected that I might have any kind of disability. I guess I assumed that everyone found things as difficult as I did, but they just had more grit and mental toughness and were better at pushing through things than I was. I did well enough academically that I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class. And I was admitted to Harvard.
Wow.
It was in college that my life started to become really difficult. Academic success became less about memorizing facts and more about participating in classroom discussions, coming up with thoughtful questions, and attending office hours where you were expected to chat with professors. There was ubiquitous pressure to participate in networking events and to strategically choose extracurricular activities to best position oneself for professional success. Plus, living in a dorm, constantly surrounded by people, was challenging, to say the least. Despite these challenges, I managed to graduate cum laude with my bachelor's degree in philosophy and to secure a respectable job as a paralegal. But at work, I soon got the sense that something was not quite right. My colleagues seemed to magically know the unwritten rules of office life that I was unable to grasp. They also seemed to be constantly going to trendy restaurants and bars, concerts, and social activities of various sorts. They seemed to spend every other weekend traveling to visit friends who lived in other states. Just hearing them talk about all these social activities made me exhausted. I preferred to spend my free time alone in my house, drawing or reading or writing or going on the internet to research various topics that I found interesting. I felt that something was wrong with me for not being able to sustain as much of a social life as my peers. Eventually, unhappy with my work situation, I got a new job at a different law office, only to find this job just as stressful as the one I had left. So I decided to go into a completely different line of work. I got a job at a grocery store slicing full cuts at a deli. This decision caused many people to think I was completely insane. Why the heck, they wondered, would someone leave a well-paying 9-to-5 job in a fancy office for a job that involves slicing cold cuts for essentially minimum wage and coming home at 10 o'clock at night smelling like roast beef or Looking back, I think I was so disillusioned with the world of Harvard and the world of law firms that I wanted to try something as much the opposite of that as possible. It was around this time that I randomly heard autism mentioned on a radio program. I started reading more about it and realized that it sounded like me. So I scheduled an appointment with a psychologist to undergo a formal evaluation. At 26 years old, I received the formal diagnosis. I am autistic. Some people consider autism to be a disorder that requires treatment, but I don't look at it that way. For me, the benefit of having an official autism diagnosis is that it helps me to better know and understand myself. All of my struggles, all of the ways in which I felt different from other people began to make sense. Instead of thinking that I was a weird, messed up, lazy, neurotypical person, I realized that I'm a perfectly normal autistic person. Unfortunately, my deli job lasted a little over a year before the long commute and the weird hours became too exhausting. After another job at a law firm, which started out great, but also eventually became too stressful and exhausting to sustain, I found myself unemployed and frankly feeling like kind of a failure at life. It was at that point that I found Biddy and Beau's. I was walking down Main Street in Melrose when I saw a sign in an empty storefront that said, "Coming soon, Biddy and Beau's. It's more than just a cup of coffee." Curious, I Googled it and I discovered that Biddy and Beau's is a coffee shop staffed almost entirely by people with disabilities. I applied and was fortunate enough to be accepted. During my time at Biddy and Beau's, I worked alongside other people with disabilities ranging from Down syndrome to cerebral palsy to schizophrenia. They're some of the most awesome people I've ever met. I also grew to accept myself as a person with a disability and to learn more about my strengths and weaknesses. What made the environment at Biddy and Beau's so special was the fact that I didn't feel the need to hide my autistic traits or to match the mannerisms and communication styles as the people around me, or to pretend to be interested in what everyone else was interested in. Instead, everyone had different interests, different personalities, and different ways of communicating, and that was considered perfectly fine. In short, it was a place where everyone was accepted for who they are. Unfortunately, Biddy and Beau's went out of business due to financial problems, and I've spent about 2 months unemployed trying to figure out what to do next. And I actually just started a new job a short time ago at Trader Joe's, which is going well so far. And whatever I end up doing for the rest of my life, whatever path I decide to go down, I know that I will move forward with understanding and acceptance of myself as an autistic person. And in my opinion, that's more valuable than any amount of money.
So I'm grateful to be here tonight, and I'm thankful my family's here. Both my kids are brave enough to tell their stories, so I figured I would give it a shot myself. And I tell these stories with my family's permission. Okay. So one of our child was out on the front lawn, having grabbed a knife, and they were under the bushes yelling they wanted to die. The day was like any other in our house during those years, unpredictable, unexpected, anxiety running high as we hoped to make it through to bedtime. I typically could not be out of their sight for too long, their separation anxiety too high. On this day, something went awry. Maybe we tried to curb video games, or a transition didn't go as planned. As I rushed outside to support, all I could think of was knives, knives, knives. The time I was 11, eating dinner with my uncle, when my grandmother asked for a knife in a way that she didn't like, and then said knife came whizzing by my face unexpectedly. Or the time we approached her while cooking and asked, apparently, an ill-timed question, and I was chased through the house with a large knife. Other families had cancer run in their families. We had mental illness, seemingly major mental illness, but we didn't openly acknowledge it. Instead, we lived with the unpredictability of it, woven into the fabric of every family visit. The older I got, I learned to separate myself, to joke and laugh at the extreme behaviors of relatives who said things like, "I really hope you drown," or "Get out of the car right now, I'm not driving you anywhere," as I got dropped off on the side of a highway in a state that was not my own. I used humor to separate myself. I wasn't like them. I would never be like them. This is likely why I kept the horrible anxiety I had as a child to myself. The secret was mine, and I would never end up like these people. Yet from an early age, I had horrible separation anxiety. I couldn't leave my house easily. I was scared of everything. My mind made up stories and seemed to move in circles constantly, worrying and ruminating. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Is someone mad at me? Would my parents come back from their nightly walk? Would they die? Would I be left alone? Then I snapped back to see my child still under the bush. I could hear sirens blaring in the distance. Had the neighbors called the police this time, or had I couldn't remember. I just felt underwater. Why aren't they getting better? Why the damn knives and the very public wielding of them? I turned to see my husband next to me, looking beat down and exhausted. Humor is our love language, and extreme behavior was often interrupted with humor. This situation warranted a big sigh and a knowing look. I knew what it was. Our current predicament seemed inevitable, only a matter of time. When we needed a good laugh, he would say, "Remember that time you called me from the payphone unit at the psych unit pretending that you were just casually visiting Boston?" I did remember. Calling him as if it was any other day, not the day I had 10 fresh stitches in my left arm and was now sitting in a locked unit, insistent on pretending this was no big deal, this would pass, I was not them. I had been sent home during the fall of my junior year of college in the middle of swim season. I swam for the University of Texas. At the time I was recruited, it was the #1 swim school in the country. Swimming had been my lifeline for the anxiety as a child. It not only kept the thoughts at bay, the thoughts of self-loathing and constant doubt, the worrying thoughts of death and dying, it also got me out of those family visits. I had created an amazing life through swimming in high school. I had friends, I had confidence, I had grown into myself and found ways to manage all the anxiety. And I was good, I was really good, like top 16 in the country good and Olympic trial qualifying good. So good you would never think that mental illness was anywhere near me. When I left UT, the separation between myself and my eccentric family was clear. I was healthy and strong, and they were people I pitied, how sick they were, and I was just gonna keep swimming. But when I arrived on campus for freshman year, everything was different. Texas felt different, Texas looked different, the trees never changed colors, the air never seemed to cool, and I just wasn't different enough. The anxiety crept back in waves. I couldn't keep up with my teammates, my Olympic gold medalist and world record holding teammates. At UT, I was a tiny fish trying to keep up, and the waves that were created were just too big. I seemed to sink lower in the water, as if I were drowning in the very water that had saved me in high school. The circular, intrusive thoughts became unbearable. You're worthless. You can't swim. You'll never amount to anything. You're fat. You're lazy. I began to secretly self-harm, hoping to make the thoughts go away. By sophomore year, mental health professionals were employed to try to shore me up. They started asking about my family tree. They wanted to know what type of mental illnesses those eccentric relatives had. And I began to name them. Bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, major depression. I told them of relatives who had been institutionalized, who lived on disability, and I could see their eyes change, the quiet clicking of their tongues as they put it all together and tried to fit me in with them. By junior year, I was making that fateful phone call shortly after I stopped swimming altogether. The child under the bush had finally given up the knife, The police arrived, as they always seem to that year, and we all agreed our child was safe to stay home with us. Those days we believed our children would likely be victim to the same fate as other relatives. Their illness is so extreme, they would live with us on disability. I had long since stopped trying to outrun our fate. Losing swimming had almost killed me, and in doing that, I surrendered to the family legacy. It was in that year when I thought we could take no more, and we were convinced we would bury our youngest child, that a mother mentioned her daughter had developed horrible OCD and separation anxiety with strep throat. It was called PANDAS, Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Syndrome associated with strep. And that was actually the craziest thing I had ever heard. I mean, viruses and infections who cause shifts in mental health, I would have known that. I'm a social worker. I spent my entire career working with children with acute mental health issues. I would know that. But I was desperate. It was worth a shot. Both kids have horrible OCD and separation anxiety. I went to the pediatrician. I asked him to check for strep. I don't know, draw labs, swab their throat, rule out this PANDAS thing. A week later, the pediatrician called to confirm that my youngest should be treated. The lab work looked awful. He seemed really sick. It had multiple markers of active infection, yet no physical symptoms. I would have told you he had the best immune system ever. Within 3 weeks of being treated, they stopped raging, he stopped trying to kill himself. Then we tested our other child, and their labs were even worse. They were even sicker. I ran towards this diagnosis with the same determination I ran towards swimming. I learned everything I could. Never had I ever seen mental illness abate this way. It was like nothing I had ever seen. And this hope, this seeming cure, drove me to understand more. I even flew to a conference at Georgetown Medical that first year. I was a social worker, and I infiltrated the medical conference. So fun. It was so important. As I sat in the front row next to our pediatrician, I soaked in every single piece of information, and as I listened, a different picture began to be painted. The doctors were describing my children, but in what felt like a sickening awakening, I realized they were also talking about me. I had separation anxiety. I had had horrible sleep disturbances and GI issues that plagued me through my 20s, chronic sinus infections, and that bipolar 2 diagnosis they tried to label me with, but it never really fit. That was the sneaky, perseverative, reassurance-seeking OCD they all kept talking about. I could feel the thoughts piling up and wanting to spill over. I went around to every specialist. It was really fun to watch. And I just kept saying, do you know, this is me too. I have this. What my kids have, I have, and let me tell you why. And I would tell them the whole story. And then slowly, as if waking up out of a deep sleep, there was almost this panic. If this was me, was this my grandmother? Was it my sister? Was it my aunt? My great aunt? What about every other relative we relegated to disability and otherness? And what if we actually missed that the body held the secrets to cure the brain?
Maggie is the former secretary on the Commission on Disabilities in here in Melrose. We also attend the same Congregational Church, and I'm lucky to consider her my friend. I'm so blessed. I was a friend. I agree. So I know a lot about Maggie. I know that Maggie loves 2 things very much. One thing she loves is Minions, and the other thing she loves, she's going to tell you about right now.
Can anybody hear me? Please tell me you can hear me. Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, great. So yes, as Erin said, Erin alluded to, one of the things that I really love is hugging. I love hugging so much because it just, for those 5 seconds a hug takes, I feel completely safe. And so that's kind of a segue into the story. So so often birthdays are days where people kind of expect gifts or give gifts. So I kind of wanted on my 25th birthday to turn that idea on its head and give gifts to other people out in public. And this was a big deal for me because before that birthday, I didn't really branch out to a lot of people. Like, I talked to people, but doing something huge and humongous to me was new. And I think what got me to do it was because I'd seen this lovely video, I think it was on YouTube, of this man that gave hugs to people, and I think he was in Sydney, Australia, as I remember. And he looked like he was having such a good time. I mean, he looked so happy, and all the people around him looked so happy, and it just looked amazing. And I, at the time, was with a group of friends, like a really wonderful group of people, and I got them to go out in Boston with me, and we gave hugs to random strangers, and it was the best time. And we had such a good time because everyone was super into it, and people, the more enthusiasm we had, the more they were enthusiastic. And to back up just a little bit, the reason, other than seeing that video and being inspired by it, the reason why I wanted to do this was I wanted to give back. I was born with a medical condition called hydrocephalus, which, if you don't know, it's a condition where fluid builds up in your head. Every one of you has cerebrospinal fluid that covers your brain and your spinal cord, that cushions your brain and your spinal cord. And in babies like me and people with brain injuries, you have the fluid going in your head, and it makes the head swell. Thankfully, there is treatment for it. There's a tube that you can see right here that goes from my head down to my abdomen, and it gets the fluid out. And a lot of these conditions require a lot of surgeries and a lot of dedicated health professionals to take care of you. And I can't thank them enough, really, for keeping me alive. And I can't thank my parents enough for standing by me and not listening when they were told I wouldn't be educatable. I really am super grateful for all of that, because I wouldn't be here today if my parents had listened to those people, if my parents hadn't had the resources, if my family hadn't had the capacity to take care of me. So I didn't know how I could ever give that back. So I decided that this was one thing that I could do. And it was a big thing for me because it's something so outside of what I was comfortable with. But at the end of that day, that was an incredible experience for me, but also I think for other people too. For my friends, they also said they had such a wonderful time. And the people that we met out in Boston, I didn't realize how much of an impact just one hug could have. They had one guy that came up to us afterwards and he said, "I quit smoking this week." And this event, coming here and hugging you people, it made me feel better. And there was another lady that came up and she said that just thanking us for being human in a concrete jungle. And these were really profound things. And I never, in my wildest dreams, expected that response, but we did it because it was so much fun. We did it for 2 more years after that. And it was the best. And well, I wouldn't do it again, probably because of the pandemic, and I know my group of friends that did it with me don't live in Boston anymore, unfortunately, so we didn't do it again after 2014. But it was a really wonderful experience, and it was a way that I could give back, and it was one of the few times in my life where I did not care what people thought. I just wanted to do this, and I did it, and I think what I want to leave with you all is that I also learned that I have a lot of love for people and a lot of caring, because that's been instilled in me by my family, by my friends. Because they love me, my friends love me enough to go out in Boston and give hugs to strangers and stand by me while I did that. So I was really grateful, and I'm grateful to be here and to tell you this story. And I think what got me to do it was the same reason I gave hugs that day, because I love so many people, and I want to spread that love, and this is my way of doing it. And I just want to thank you all for your time. And also, really quickly, I also serve on, like Erin said, I serve on the Commission on Disability because I care about people. I want to make things better. And so that theme of giving back has stuck with me for a very long time. And just thank you for listening to me. I love you.
Yeah, I think we could all use a Since loss of my son, I really remind people when they ask if there's anything they can do to just hug your loved ones. It goes a long way. So last, we're going to introduce Fran. This is also Fran's first time sharing her story in public. She is a member of the Temple. She's a retired psychologist. She's going to talk to us about self-acceptance. And we also found that tonight we had a mutual friend, Ruth Richard, who's a little person, who's a great mentor to my family when I was a young girl. So thank you. Welcome, Fran.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fran, and I'm disabled. It took me decades to be able to say those words. My disability identity wove its way into my life 3 times over. I guess the universe really wanted to be sure I got the message. My first disability brought me lifelong partial paralysis in my trunk and left leg. My second disability is hidden. It involves a kind of emotional paralysis, typically called PTSD. And my third disability involves neither physical nor emotional paralysis. This time around, a degenerative neuromuscular disorder has my nerves dying and my muscles weakening, bringing me lots of pain and fatigue. I'd like to tell the universe, yeah, I finally got the message. My name is Fran, and I'm disabled. Again, it took me decades to be able to say that and own it with pride. My story starts in 1949 when I was 9 months old and polio came to stay. Polio kids were not considered disabled by their parents or larger community. Polio kids, we could overcome the effects of polio with hard work. We were so above and beyond that polio that we didn't even say the word. There was an unwritten rule in my house and others' homes that you just didn't say the word polio. So in 1949, at age 9 months, I was completely paralyzed from neck to feet. But from the word go, I needed to work hard to overcome the paralysis and then to get rid of those braces and crutches. So that's what I did. And if I did that, no one would know I had polio. And I succeeded in really never hearing the word disabled in reference to myself until I was in my 30s. I went along with this broad-based denial in my home and larger community. By the time I was 10 years old, I was free of all mobility aids and played along with the beliefs that I was just like everyone else. But I wasn't, and deep inside I knew it. I knew I was different or bad or some such thing. At one point, after a summer that included 3 surgeries, I found it particularly difficult to navigate the steps at school. The school principal sent 2 janitors to lift me up and carry me up the stairs to my classroom. But before they could get there, I scooched my way up that flight of steps on my butt. I was a really feisty kid. I was also really excited about getting rid of my braces and crutches. Then one day, shortly before my 12th birthday, I was in 7th grade. The universe said, hello girl, I'm gonna send you one of those wake-up calls. While I stood with the other kids, waiting for the school bus on a snowy, icy street, the bus driver mistakenly backed up, hit me, and actually ran over my paralyzed polio leg. I remember my friend screaming at the bus driver. I was released from the ER that afternoon, and to prove to my family and myself that I was fine, I began walking around the house that night. Adults would tell me how lucky I was, that I went to public school, that I didn't need a wheelchair, how lucky I was that polio virus had not hit my lungs, how lucky I was to have overcome polio. But the truth is, I never overcame it, and neither did anyone else. I grew up hating the word lucky. And once, when I was in graduate school, and a professor used it in reference to my life with polio, I almost punched him. In my early teens, I became aware of my second disability, a hidden one. This was in the early 1960s. Psychiatric disabilities were pretty much unknown, and to the extent that they were acknowledged, they were a source of even greater shame than were the physical disabilities. So when I had many symptoms of PTSD and also depression, there were no names given for those conditions. My psychiatric disability became my second big secret. I believe that the depression and PTSD started with my many childhood hospitalizations. They're always with me. And in fact, when I worked as a psychologist, I'm a retired psychologist, I worked with trauma survivors, and I did a lot of research on trauma. And in fact, there is a type of trauma called hospitalization trauma. To those in the room with hidden psychiatric disabilities, I want to say, I hear you, I see you, and I honor you. The feisty kid became a feisty and angry adult, young adult. I refused any offers of assistance for something I might have difficulty doing, and often responded by saying, "Did I ask you for help?" I remained pretty much in denial about being disabled. Again, I knew there was something different about me, and I interpreted that difference as something bad or lazy or other not so helpful terms. I came out as a lesbian when I was in graduate school in my 20s, and this coming out opened the door for me to come out as disabled. But that still didn't happen until I was in my mid-30s. My life partner and now wife, Sue, has always been active in the disability rights movement. And she really helped me finally identify as a disabled woman and to become more actively involved with disability-related issues. As a disabled woman myself, not just a therapist and advocate. It's a good thing I came to that place because in the late 1980s, after that wonderful childhood of overcoming that polio, I began to have new symptoms, which no one has yet understood. Post-polio syndrome is a separate and for me much more impactful disability. A degenerative neuromuscular disorder, my third disability. This one affects every aspect of my life, even more than the first two, if that's possible. All I can say is that it's a good thing I finally accepted the reality of being disabled, because this third strike at my life force is definitely a daily struggle. Although I'd sworn to never use crutches or braces again, I found myself needing a cane, then crutches, then braces, then a manual push chair, and now a motorized chair. Finally, I'd like to say that I am lucky in so many ways. Yes, I still live with pain on a daily basis throughout my body, and on a scale of 1 to 10, it's often an 8. I've always had a family that supported me and respected me in every way possible and still does. I am lucky to have been a feisty kid and to have had parents who accepted that feistiness. I am lucky to have been able to go to graduate school on a full scholarship and to become a psychologist and work in jobs that I wanted and that were right for me. I am lucky to have become fluent in American Sign Language. I'm lucky to be married to a woman who knew about disabilities, worked in the disability rights movement, and showed me the way to acknowledging my own disabilities. I'm lucky to have wonderful friends and family, and to have been given the gift of living with 15 different dogs and 7 foster kids on an intimate basis for so many years. My name is Fran, and I am disabled.
I'm intentionally leaving a little time for pause, for a little bit of breath in the room. Let everything that you've heard this evening saturate into you. Just a couple of announcements. We're going to wrap it up pretty quickly. There are 2 things that cannot stay in this room anymore. All of you, you can't stay here for the rest of the evening, and also those snacks that are on those tables, so make sure you go over there and
Leave together.
leave together.
Leave
With the snacks, yeah. I also want to thank one of our partners in crime, Tracy Okra, all the way from Rhode Island, for providing For those of you that are in social media spaces and platforms and what have you, this evening's event will be, it has been broadcast live on YouTube. The link appears on the Follow Your Art channel. Now, if you're not in the Facebook world, that's fine as well. I would like to drive some media online traffic to the websites that you have seen in your program, to our wonderful facilitator moderators. Thank you so much, Becky, and thank you so much, Aaron. My boss is the clinical clinical psychologist brought something to my attention, that the nature of a growl, the growl, has evolved into us as humans as laughter. See what you just did there? Something unexpected happened, and you reacted to it, so we bark at the unfamiliar. So internalize that sensation. I'm going to pass the microphone to my colleague, but just continue to laugh at our humorous humanity. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna let you all go. I just want to say thank you for being present. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of story sharing. I like that phrase, better than storytelling. We have our tellers, but our tellers need somebody to take their stories and take them out of this space. So thank you for sharing stories tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody who's helped us with this. Again, Dorothy and Evans, thank you so much for using this space. And we will do this again.